The neon lights of the space diner flickered above the crowded hall. Voices of dozens of alien customers echoed, plates clattered, and the smell of fried oil mixed with bitter drinks filled the air. At the corner, an alien waitress moved quickly between tables, her long fingers carrying trays stacked with dishes, her eyes tired, her shoulders heavy. She had been working since dawn, and still no one had even looked her in the eye. For her, this was normal. Customers treated her like air, just another servant to throw words at, insults at, and sometimes even credits at. Her name was written on the tag pinned to her chest, but no one ever read it. She had learned to keep her head low and move fast, invisible and forgotten. On that evening, however, something changed. The diner door hissed open and a human stepped inside. He was tall but not intimidating, dressed in simple clothes that looked worn from travel, his eyes scanning the noisy hall before he quietly sat at an empty booth. The waitress noticed him only because he was different, not because she expected anything unusual. She walked toward him, tray balanced against her arm, and spoke in the dull voice she used with every customer. "What will you have?" she asked without emotion. Humans rarely visited this side of the sector, and she thought he would be just another rude customer. But the man lifted his head, his gaze met hers, and something strange happened. He smiled, not a cruel smile, not a mocking one, but warm and genuine. "Good evening," he said softly. "Could I please get a meal, something hot? Anything you recommend?" The words hit her like a shock. "Please, good evening," she almost dropped her tray. For a moment she could not answer. Her throat tightened and her mind went blank. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Finally she nodded quickly, muttered the order, and hurried back to the kitchen, her legs shaking as if she had run a mile. In the kitchen, the cook yelled at her for being slow, but she barely heard him. Her mind replayed the human's voice, the way he had looked at her, as if she was a person and not just a shadow. She told herself it meant nothing. Maybe he was just strange, maybe humans were different. But deep inside, something warm flickered, a tiny spark she had buried long ago. When she returned with the food, the human thanked her. He looked at the plate and then looked at her again. "You brought this fast, thank you," he said. "Thank you," her heart skipped. No alien ever thanked her. They shouted, they mocked, they ignored, but never thanked. She placed the plate on the table, almost trembling, and turned quickly before he could see her face. But even as she served other customers, her ears kept catching his soft voice, his calm tone, so different from the harsh words that usually filled the diner. She hated herself for caring, hated that she kept glancing toward him, and yet she could not stop. Hours passed, and the human finished his meal. When he stood up to leave, he placed credits on the table, more than the price of the food. She rushed to clear the table, thinking he had made a mistake, but tucked under the plate was a small note written in simple letters. "Food was good, thank you." Her chest tightened, her breath caught. She almost collapsed right there. It was the first time anyone had left her a note, the first time someone had remembered that she cooked and served with care. She clutched the note in her hand, afraid someone might take it away. Her fellow workers laughed when they saw her face, but she ignored them. For the first time in years, she felt seen that night long after the diner closed. She lay in her small sleeping corner, staring at the note under the dim light. Her hands trembled as she read the words again and again. "Food was good, thank you." Simple words. Nothing special to others, but to her, they were everything. She whispered the words to herself, her voice shaking. Why would a human do this? The next morning she woke with a strange energy in her chest. She told herself it was foolish that the human would never return, that it was only an accident, but in her heart, she could not help waiting. Every time the door hissed open, her eyes flicked toward it. Every step she took that day carried a hidden question. Would he come back? She did not know yet that this was only the beginning. She did not know that the human would return, and when he did, her world would shake again, harder than before. But in that moment, holding the note in her hand, she felt something she had forgotten long ago: hope. The next day began like any other in the noisy diner. The same crowd filled the booths, the same sharp voices ordered food without care, and the alien waitress moved silently between tables, her hands steady but her heart restless. She told herself not to think about the human, not to wait for him. But every time the door hissed open, she found her eyes darting toward it. Most of the time it was just more of the usual faces: rough merchants, drunk miners, loud soldiers, all ignoring her. But then, as the afternoon light filtered through the dusty windows, The door slid open and there he was. The human stepped inside again. The same simple clothes, the same calm eyes, and the same quiet presence that felt so different from everyone else. Her chest tightened, she nearly dropped the tray she was carrying. She whispered to herself, "He came back." The human looked around the diner, and when his gaze landed on her, he smiled. It was small and gentle, but enough to make her throat dry. She forced herself to walk toward his booth, trying to keep her voice steady. "What will you have today?" she asked. He leaned back slightly and said, "I'll take what you recommend again." Recommend. No one had ever asked her that. Her race was considered too low for opinions, too unimportant for choices. Yet here was a human who had asked twice in 2 days. As if her thoughts mattered, she stood frozen for a moment, then nodded quickly and left for the kitchen. The cook shouted at her for being distracted, but she barely noticed. Her mind was racing, wondering why this man spoke to her like she was human too. When she returned with the meal, he thanked her again, his eyes warm. But this time, instead of turning away, he asked softly, "What's your name?" The word struck her harder than any insult ever had. Her name. He wanted her name. Her lips trembled as she whispered it, the sound weak, as if she had forgotten how to say it with pride. The human repeated it slowly, almost carefully, and nodded. "That's a good name." She nearly stumbled. No one had ever said that. Her co-workers laughed at her name. Customers never used it. Her own people sometimes spoke it with scorn, but this human had said it kindly. As if her name had value, she quickly turned away, afraid he might see the tears welling in her eyes. At the far counter, 2 alien workers watched with mocking grins. "Strange human," one muttered. "Doesn't he know she's worthless?" The other chuckled. "Maybe he's blind, or maybe he's lonely." The waitress heard them, her ears burning, but she said nothing. Still, their words planted a seed of doubt. What if he was just playing with her? What if kindness was just a mask? As evening fell, the diner grew quieter, but the human stayed longer than most. He seemed to be writing in a small notebook, pausing now and then to sip water. The waitress pretended not to watch him, but her eyes betrayed her. Every movement he made felt heavy with meaning. When he finally stood, he left credits again. Enough for the food and a little extra. She walked to the table to clear it, heart thumping, half expecting another note. But there was none, only the credits and the faint trace of his presence. She sighed, disappointed and relieved at the same time. As she pocketed the payment, her hands trembled. She told herself, "It doesn't matter, he will not return again. It was just chance." Yet her heart refused to believe her own words. That night, as she left the diner, she noticed shadows moving in the alley. A group of thugs leaned against the wall, whispering and laughing. She caught bits of their words. "That human, he comes here again, easy target." Her stomach turned cold. They were talking about him, her hands clenched, and fear spread through her chest. Should she warn him? Should she stay silent? She walked faster, her mind torn. If she said anything, the thugs might turn on her. If she stayed quiet, the human could be hurt. The choice twisted her heart like a blade. Why did it matter to her so much? Why could she not ignore him like everyone else? Back in her small sleeping corner, she lay awake. The memory of his smile haunted her. The sound of him saying her name played in her ears, and the dark words of the thugs echoed louder than both. She curled up, her body trembling. Tomorrow he might return, and if he did, the danger would follow him, she whispered into the night, her voice breaking. "Why do you make me care?" The night air outside the diner was heavy, filled with smoke from the ships docked nearby. The alien waitress walked quickly through the narrow alleys, clutching her small bag of tips. Her heart still unsettled after hearing the thugs whisper about the human. She told herself to forget it, to mind her own life. But the words kept echoing in her ears. "Easy target, human fool, we'll make him pay." She shivered, wondering why she even cared. Back in her corner room, she lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The neon lights from outside bled through the cracks. Flashing red and blue, her thoughts refused to rest. She saw his face again, the way he had smiled. The way he had asked her name. Why did it matter so much? Why could she not just erase him from her mind like every other customer? The next day, the diner was packed again, louder than before. But the waitress noticed something different. At the far corner table, the thugs from last night had gathered, their eyes sharp, their voices low. She felt her stomach twist when she realized they were waiting for him, and then the door opened. The human stepped inside as if nothing was wrong. He walked calmly to his usual booth. Smiling at her when he saw her, her knees almost gave out. How could he smile like that in a place so full of danger? She wanted to warn him, to tell him not to stay. But fear chained her tongue. She walked to his table, her tray trembling in her hands. "What will you have today?" she asked, her voice softer than before. He leaned forward, studying her face. "You seem worried. Is everything all right?" Her eyes darted toward the corner where the thugs sat. She quickly looked away, shaking her head. "It's nothing. Just work." But inside her heart screamed, "Leave. Please leave." The human gave his order and she hurried to the kitchen. As she prepared his meal, she caught the cook muttering, "That human again, he doesn't belong here. Trouble will follow him." Trouble had already followed him, she thought bitterly, and she was the only one who seemed to know. Her hands shook as she placed the food on the plate. When she brought it to him, he thanked her again, his voice calm, his eyes warm. But the thugs were watching, their smirks cruel. One of them leaned closer to the others and whispered something that made them laugh. She could not hear the words, but she could feel the threat in the air, sharp like a blade pressed to her skin. The waitress moved from table to table, but her eyes kept sliding back to the human. He ate slowly, unaware of the shadows around him. Her chest burned with fear and anger. Why was she the only one who cared? Why did no one else see what was about to happen? As the evening grew late, the diner emptied. The thugs stayed, pretending to drink, their eyes fixed on the booth. The human finally finished his meal, leaving credits on the table. When he stood to go, the thugs rose too, following him with quiet steps. The waitress froze, her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to shout, to run after him, but her feet refused to move. The human stepped out of the diner doors, the shadows swallowing him. The thugs followed, their laughter low and cold. The waitress clutched the edge of a table until her knuckles turned white. If she went after him, she might get hurt. If she stayed, he might never return. Minutes passed like hours, the silence pressing against her ears. Finally, she grabbed her small coat and rushed out the back door, her heart hammering. The streets were dark, lit only by scattered lamps and the glow of ships. She could hear voices ahead, the thugs' laughter mixing with the sound of footsteps. Her body shook with fear, but she moved closer, hiding behind a metal crate. She saw them corner him at the edge of an alley. The tallest thug stepped forward, sneering, "Human, you think you belong here, you don't. Pay us now and maybe you walk away." The human's voice carried calm but firm. "I'm not looking for trouble." The thugs laughed, circling him like predators. The waitress bit her lip so hard it bled. Her hands shook, her legs wanted to run, but something inside her refused to let go. She could not look away for the first time in her life. She cared about someone else more than her own fear. Her whisper slipped into the night, trembling but real. "Please don't hurt him." The alley behind the diner was dark, the lamps above flickering weakly. The human stood calm, though the thugs had surrounded him, their voices sharp, their threats louder with every second. The alien waitress pressed herself against the cold wall, her breath shaky, her heart racing. She wanted to scream, wanted to run into the light, but fear held her in chains. Then something unexpected happened. The human did not fight, did not shout. He simply raised his hands and said, "I don't want trouble, let me go. I've done nothing to you." His voice was steady, steady in a way that shook her inside. Even the thugs paused for a moment, confused by his calmness, but then their leader snarled, "You don't belong here, human. Pay us or bleed." Her knees weakened, she thought he would be crushed. Yet the human did something strange. He turned his head slightly, and for the briefest moment his eyes met hers in the shadows. She gasped, stepping back. Did he know she was there? Did he sense her watching? The thugs never noticed. But that one look felt like a silent message. He wasn't afraid, and somehow he wanted her not to be either. A loud noise interrupted, a patrol ship passed overhead, and the thugs melted back into the shadows, muttering curses. The human straightened his jacket and walked away as if nothing had happened. His steps calm, his head unbowed. The waitress slid down against the wall, trembling, nearly collapsing from relief. Her eyes burned, her chest hurt, but her heart whispered. He lived. The next day, she dragged herself back to the diner, her hands clumsy, her mind heavy. She told herself he wouldn't return, not after that. No sane person would come back to the same dangerous place. And yet, when the door hissed open in the late afternoon, there he was again. Her tray almost slipped from her fingers. The human walked straight to his booth, the same one as before, and smiled when he saw her. "Good to see you again," he said. Her heart nearly stopped. She felt her legs shake. Why? Why would he come back after almost being attacked? Why would he risk himself? Her voice cracked as she asked, "Why are you here again?" He looked at her with calm eyes. "Because you remembered my meal, and it was good. And because this place feels honest." She almost laughed bitterly. No one ever called the diner honest. No one ever called her honest. She brought him his order, trying to steady her hands. But when she placed the plate in front of him, he said the words again. The same words that shook her before. "Thank you." This time her body could not hide the storm inside. Her knees wobbled, her hands shook, and she gripped the edge of the table to keep herself from falling. She whispered, "Don't say that." The human tilted his head, confused. "Why not?" "You deserve thanks." Her chest tightened. The air felt too heavy. Her vision blurred. She nearly collapsed right there beside his booth. For so long she had lived like a shadow, unseen and unwanted. And now this human had spoken two simple words twice. Words that no one else had ever cared to give her. It was too much. Her heart could not bear it. She turned quickly, rushing back to the kitchen. Her hands pressed against her mouth to stop the sobs from spilling out. Her co-workers noticed her pale face. One sneered. "What's wrong with you?" "Collapsing over scraps," another laughed. "Don't tell me that human is making you weak." She ignored them, though their voices cut her deeper than knives. Inside she was breaking from kindness, not cruelty. And that frightened her more than the thugs ever could. When she returned to his booth later, the human was writing again in his little notebook. He looked up and smiled softly. "You seem tired. Don't push yourself too hard." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her throat was dry. He cared, he noticed, and for a moment, the noise of the diner, the jeers of her co-workers, the memory of the thugs, all of it faded. There was only his voice, steady and warm. When he finished his meal, he stood and placed the credits on the table again. More than enough. But this time he also left a folded slip of paper under the plate. Her hands trembled as she picked it up after he left. Opening it carefully, she found words written in neat human letters. "You're stronger than you think." Don't forget that. Her body shook, her breath caught, and she pressed the paper against her chest. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent but unstoppable. She whispered, "Why are you doing this to me?" For the second time in 2 days, she nearly collapsed, not from fear, not from pain, but from kindness that felt too heavy for her broken heart to hold. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this was no accident anymore. Something had begun, something she could neither run from nor ignore. The paper with human writing still rested against her chest that night. The waitress read it again and again. "You're stronger than you think." The words both comforted and terrified her, because she had never felt strong, never believed she could be, but now someone else believed it, and that belief felt heavier than any burden she had carried before. Morning came and the diner filled with the same loud crowd. She tried to work as if nothing had changed, but inside her thoughts refused to settle. Every time she looked at the booth where the human always sat, her heart squeezed, and every time the door opened, she felt fear instead of hope, because she remembered the whispers, the shadows, the thugs who had not disappeared. By the middle of the day, she saw them again, 3 of them, the same ones from the alley, sliding into the far booth. Their eyes sharp, they pretended to drink, but she could feel their gaze scanning the room like hunters waiting for prey. Her throat went dry, her skin prickled with unease. They were waiting for him, waiting for the human to walk through that door again. And he did. As if fate had written it, the door hissed open and the human entered, calm as ever. He gave her the same smile, the one that made her legs weak. Her heart pounded as she hurried to greet him, whispering, "You shouldn't be here." He looked at her with concern. "Why, what's wrong?" She shook her head quickly. "Just, please eat fast." The thugs leaned closer to each other, whispering and laughing, their eyes never leaving his booth. The waitress's hand shook as she brought his food. She placed the plate down, trying to keep her voice steady. "Eat and go," she whispered, her eyes begging him. But the human only studied her face, and instead of fear, he smiled again. "You're worried about me." The words cut into her heart. Yes, she was worried, more than she should be. More than was safe as he ate. The diner grew quieter, customers leaving one by one until only a few remained. The thugs stayed, their laughter loud, their boots tapping against the floor in rhythm like a warning drum. The waitress's pulse raced. She kept moving from table to table, but her eyes always slid back to him. Every bite he took felt like time running out. Every second brought the moment closer when they would move. And then it happened. The human finished his meal, stood up calmly, and placed his credits on the table. He turned to leave, and the thugs rose too. Spreading out to block the exit, her breath caught. Her tray slipped from her hands and clattered against the floor. The sound drew every eye, but she didn't care. She whispered to herself, "No, not now," the leader thug smirked, stepping into the human's path. Well. "Here's the fool again," he sneered. "Thought you could eat here without paying the tax." The human's voice was calm. "Steady, I've already paid." The thug shoved his chest roughly. "Not to us." "You haven't," the others laughed, closing in. The waitress felt her body move before her mind decided. She rushed forward, standing between the human and the thugs. Her hands trembling but raised. "Stop," she shouted. Though her voice cracked, he did nothing. "Leave him alone." The diner fell silent, even the cook froze behind the counter. The thugs blinked in surprise, then burst into laughter. "You," the leader sneered. "You dare speak a worthless waitress." Defending him, he shoved her shoulder and she stumbled back, nearly falling. The human caught her before she hit the ground. His grip firm, steady. She looked up into his calm eyes, and something inside her snapped. The fear, the silence, the years of being invisible, all of it broke, replaced by fire. She straightened, her voice louder this time. "I said leave him alone." The thugs' smiles faded. One of them hissed, "You'll regret that." The human stepped forward now, placing himself in front of her, his tone sharp. "Enough. Walk away." The tension in the air grew thick, heavy like a storm about to break. Customers near the door hurried out, not wanting to be caught in what was coming. The waitress's hands shook. Her chest heaved, but she refused to step back. For the first time in her life, she stood against those who had always mocked her. Her body trembled, but her voice was firm. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying and wonderful. She wasn't just standing for him. She was standing for herself. The thugs closed in, their faces twisted with anger. The danger was real now, closer than ever. And though she was terrified, though her knees nearly gave way, she refused to collapse. Her whisper echoed in her heart, fierce and trembling. "Not this time. I won't run." The diner had never been so quiet. Every eye watched the standoff in the center of the room. The waitress trembling but standing tall, the human steady and calm, and the thugs circling like wolves ready to tear them apart. The cook hid behind the counter. The last few customers slipped out the door, leaving only the sound of boots scraping against the floor and her own heartbeat thundering in her chest. The leader thug leaned closer, his breath sour, his voice sharp. "Move out of the way, girl, this isn't your fight." The waitress's throat burned, but she forced the words out. "It is now." The thug's grin twisted into a snarl. "You'll regret this," one of the others laughed cruelly. "Look at her, shaking like a leaf, ready to collapse. And yet she thinks she can stop us." Her knees did shake. Her hands trembled, but she did not move aside. The human stepped forward, his hand brushing hers for just a moment, steadying her, grounding her. He whispered low enough that only she could hear, "You don't have to do this." But she shook her head fiercely, whispering back, "Yes, I do." For so long she had kept silent, swallowed insults, endured being invisible, but something about his kindness had broken that silence. If she stepped aside now, she knew she would never forgive herself. Her voice rose louder, stronger than before. "Leave him alone, or you'll answer to me." The thugs roared with laughter, but their leader's eyes burned with anger. He shoved her again, harder this time, and she stumbled back, almost falling. But the human caught her once more, steadying her on her feet. This time she did not feel weak in his arms. She felt stronger, as if his touch gave her a strength she had never known. The leader spat on the floor. "Fine, you both want pain. Then pain is what you'll get." He lunged forward, but the human moved fast, grabbing his arm and twisting it with surprising strength. The thug cursed, stumbling back. His face red with shock, the other two rushed in. Fists raised, the waitress gasped, stepping back. Torn between fear and the urge to protect, one of the thugs swung at the human, but he ducked, the fist slamming into the wall instead. The crack of bone echoed in the diner. The thug screamed in pain. The human shoved the second attacker aside, his movements quick and precise. Not wild like the thugs, he fought not like a brute, but like someone who had seen real battles before. The waitress's heart pounded, her eyes wide. She wanted to hide, but instead she shouted, "Stop this! Leave now!" Her voice cut through the chaos, sharp and desperate. For a second the thugs hesitated, staring at her with hate. The human stood in front of her, blood on his lip but his eyes steady. He said firmly, "You heard her. Get out." The leader's face twisted in fury, but there was hesitation now. He glanced at his men, one clutching his broken hand, the other groaning from the shove. Finally he spat on the floor again, glaring at both of them. "This isn't over." With that, the three thugs stormed out, slamming the door behind them, their threats lingering in the air like smoke. Silence filled the diner, broken only by the waitress's shaky breathing. Her body trembled so hard she could barely stand. Her vision blurred with tears she could no longer hold back. She turned to the human, whispering, "Why didn't you just run? Why do you keep coming back here?" He wiped the blood from his lip, his voice calm, "Because sometimes running isn't the answer." Her chest ached. Her knees gave way and she sank into the nearest chair. The human crouched beside her, his eyes soft but serious. "You didn't have to stand with me, but you did. That was brave." She shook her head, tears falling. "No, it was foolish. I nearly got us both killed," he smiled faintly. "Maybe, but it takes courage to choose foolishness for the right reason." Her hands clutched the slip of paper he had given her before. Now damp from her tears, she whispered, "I don't understand you. No one has ever treated me like this." The human's voice was steady. "Because you're not invisible. You matter." The word struck deeper than any wound and she covered her face. Sobbing quietly, he waited, not rushing her, letting her break in peace for the first time in her life. She realized she had made a choice. Not the choice to serve food or clean tables, not the choice to keep silent when insulted, but the choice to stand, to defend, to risk everything for someone who had shown her kindness. It terrified her, but it also set something new ablaze inside her. She whispered through her tears, "If this is foolish, then I'll keep choosing it." The diner was silent after the thugs left. Only the faint hum of the neon lights filled the room. The waitress sat slumped in the chair, her hands trembling, her chest heavy as if she had been carrying the weight of an entire world. The human crouched beside her, his presence steady, his voice calm. "It's over, they're gone," but inside her, it was not over. Her body shook. Her throat ached and her heart beat too fast. She had stood against them, shouted, chosen to face danger, but now the fear came rushing back all at once. Her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hide, and she whispered, I can't do this." The human placed a hand gently on the table beside her, not touching her, but close enough to feel safe. "You already did," he said quietly. "You were braver than anyone else in this place." Her tears fell harder, her voice breaking. "I was weak, I was shaking. I nearly fell to the floor." He shook his head slowly. "Courage doesn't mean you don't shake. It means you keep standing anyway." His words cut deep, not like a blade, but like light breaking through heavy clouds. She wanted to believe him, but years of being invisible and worthless wrapped around her like chains. Her voice was small, broken. "Why do you care? I'm just a waitress, nothing more." The human leaned closer, his eyes steady. "You are not nothing, you matter. You've always mattered, someone just needed to say it." Her breath caught. Her hands pressed against her face and she nearly collapsed again. This time not from fear but from the weight of kindness, she whispered, "Stop. Please stop, I can't bear it." But the human shook his head, his voice calm. "No, you deserve to hear it. You've deserved it for a long time." The paper he had left her before was still in her pocket, crumpled but precious. She pulled it out with shaking fingers and showed it to him. "Stronger than you think," she whispered. "But I don't feel strong." The human's eyes softened. "That's why I wrote it. Because I saw it in you even if you didn't." Her tears blurred the words, but her heart held onto them like fire in the cold. Time passed. The diner slowly emptied until only the two of them remained. The cook muttered and left, shaking his head, leaving the lights dim and the air quiet. The waitress wiped her eyes, her body still trembling, but for the first time in years she felt seen. She looked at the human and whispered, "Why do you keep coming back here? It's dangerous." "You should stay away." He smiled faintly. "Because this place has something worth coming back for." Her chest tightened, her breath shallow. "You mean me?" He nodded once, steady and sure. "Yes, you." Her hands gripped the edge of the table. Her knees weak and she nearly slid to the floor again, but he caught her gently, steadying her. She leaned against him for just a moment, her tears soaking into his sleeve, her voice trembling. "No one has ever chosen me before," he whispered back. "Then let this be the first time." The night outside was quiet when they finally stepped out together. The street smelled of smoke and rust, but under the neon glow for the first time, she did not feel small. She walked beside him, her steps unsteady but guided by the warmth at her side. Every shadow still frightened her. Every echo of footsteps made her heart race. But now she was not alone. The fear had not vanished, but the weight was lighter when shared. At the corner of the street, she stopped and looked up at him, her eyes red but her voice steady. "If they come back, they'll hurt you." He shrugged lightly, his eyes calm. "Then let them try. I've faced worse," she shook her head. "I don't want you hurt because of me." He smiled. "I'm not here because of danger. I'm here because of you." Her body nearly gave way again, her heart too full. This time she did not fight the collapse. She let herself sink against him, her arms weak, her tears endless. But it was not the collapse of despair. It was the collapse of release, of letting go of years of silence and invisibility. The human held her steady, his voice low and gentle. "You're safe now. You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in her life, she believed it. The thugs might return, the world might still be cruel, but something had changed forever. She was no longer invisible, no longer worthless, no longer alone. A human had seen her, had chosen her, and that was enough to begin again.